All right, this is the last lecture to accompany Chapter 5. It's on photosynthesis. I'm going to go through some specific examples of organisms that use photosynthesis, talk about how we know what we know and how people benefit. So I'll go through various groups. I have a nice picture on the bottom of a electron microscope picture of a chloroplast. You can see the stacks of membranes. Those are the thylakoid membranes. That's where the chlorophyll is, and those are granum. And then above that is an olive tree, one of the oldest cultivated trees, a really important source of food and oil in the Middle East for many, many civilizations for thousands and thousands of years. Okay, so we're going to kind of just review photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, carbon dioxide and water, with the help of chlorophyll and light energy, is turned into glucose and oxygen, as well as a little more water. This is really accomplished through two sets of reactions: the light-dependent reactions that occur in the thylakoids, and that involves two photosystems where groups of chlorophyll break open oxygen to release the oxygen and hydrogens and electrons, and then to make ATP. Then that ATP and those hydrogen ions and electrons go into the Calvin cycle, where CO2 in the stroma is reduced to glucose. Okay, for the most part, we're going to talk about plants, although not exclusively, and this occurs in the leaves of plants, in the mesohyal cells on the inner part of the leaf, where you have lots and lots of chloroplasts. The granum have, again, the light-dependent reactions. The photosystems are there, and the stroma surrounds the gramma, and that's where Calvin cycle occurs. This is really important because photosynthesis produces all food for humans. It produces the energy that is going to drive the biosphere. Plants and animals all depend on photosynthesis. And fossil fuels, even, where that's stored energy from sunlight that's been buried plants and buried algae. Another really important thing is photosynthesis releases oxygen gas, and that's needed for us to do cellular respiration, and it makes eukaryotic life possible. It provides 20% of the atmosphere. Before photosynthesis, we didn't have oxygen in the atmosphere. It wasn't until the first bacteria that could do photosynthesis appeared, and these were cyanobacteria. Their fossils first show up in rocks that are about 2.1 billion years old, and very soon after they show up, we start seeing evidence that different minerals are being deposited because the environment of Earth, the water, and the atmosphere now contained oxygen. And so this is called the Great Oxidation Event. And cyanobacteria are really responsible for this. And in addition, these bacteria are clearly related to the chloroplasts that we find in eukaryotic cells. They have a similar size, a similar shape. They share DNA. Remember, chloroplasts do have their own DNA, and it is a circular loop like in bacteria. So it appears that the chloroplasts in plants comes from cyanobacteria, as does the chloroplast in other eukaryotic algae. These are simple eukaryotes that are usually single-celled or just a small group of cells. They all have nucleuses and mitochondria, but some of them have chloroplasts. And so these are the primitive algae, and they're common in marine and fresh water. These eukaryotic algae occur in many groups. They're abundant. Some of them you've probably heard of, like volvox and diatoms and things like that. But they're present. And they can be very, very abundant. One group, the diatoms, do photosynthesis within a shell that's made of silica. And when they die, these guys sink, and they produce this siliceous ooze on the bottom of certain oceans because they're one of the most abundant fresh or marine algae in many places. Um, and so that deposit turns into rock over long periods of time. Here on the lower picture, you see the White Cliffs of Dover, which were basically entirely made of diatoms. So it's a eukaryotic algae that's abundant in water. Another algae that you might be familiar with are the brown algae. Some of these are single or groups of small cells, but one is very large and looks very much like a plant, but it's not really closely related. It's an example of convergent evolution. And those are kelp. Kelp is among the most rapidly growing organisms. It produces marine forest-like vegetation in temperate waters. They have a holdfast that holds them down, and they produce a float that kind of helps them move towards the surface. Kelp are an excellent source of food, and kelp forests are among the most diverse ecosystems in marine ecosystems around, and so they have really important ecology. Okay, now getting to the land plants, I'm going to talk about grasses. Grasses are a large group of flowering plants that have a hollow stem with nodes or joints between different areas of the stem. The leaves grow from the base of the plant, and so the growth areas are kind of protected underground. And so grasses are they can tolerate burning and grazing and things like that, so they're really tough. Grasses include the rice, wheat, and corn, and often we eat the seed heads. And so that upper right picture is a seed head from a grass, which are among the staples for us. One of the most important grasses that you know of is corn or maize. It's a grass that has that C4 metabolism that makes it very resistant to heat and drought and allows it to grow well in southern U.S. and even south into the tropics. This was a grass that was domesticated by Native Americans in Mexico over 10,000 years ago. And it was really, they did an amazing job because that is the largest seed head of any grass produced ever by a long ways. And that was done with artificial selection before humans or before Europeans got involved. The little guy on the right is an Aztec god, and it shows him being born from corn. So one of the most important staples, again, a Native American crop. Another really important photosynthetic organism are trees, and in particular I'm going to talk about oak trees because that's a really diverse group of trees, over 500 species. They're characterized by having these very lobed leaves and a fruit that's called an acorn. It's a nut. And so it produces a very large fruit that lots of animals use as a source of food in the winter, and that humans used to regularly grind up into flour. And so humans have used this for food too. What's probably most notable about oaks now is that it produces a very hard, very durable wood that is really ideal for certain usages because it has fewer lateral pores, and so it can be used to store liquids or make ships. And so among the most valuable woods for the last, 5,000 years has been oak because it's used to make barrels and used to make ships. But it's just one of many, many valuable woods. But it's a plant. There's lots of chloroplasts in the leaves. It's doing photosynthesis very effectively. Okay, and I should point out that it's not just plants and algae and cyanobacteria. There are a few animals that have some tricks up their sleeves and are able to get something almost directly out of photosynthesis. One of those really successful animal groups are corals. Corals are relatives of jellyfish. They have a skeleton, though, that they secrete around a growth form called a polyp. And that polyp has a mouth and tentacles, and it can eat fish, but it also has within its tissue symbiotic algae. Okay, these aren't chloroplasts, they're dinoflagellates. Okay, so it's a eukaryotic algae that lives within the tissues of the coral animal, because coral is an animal. And so the unique color of all these corals shown here is due to the dinoflagellates inside. And so corals are a very successful group because not only can they eat small fish, but if they're in sunlight, their algae will produce sugars, and there'll be an exchange of sugars that are given to the animal, and in return, the animal will give its nitrogen waste to the symbiotic algae within inside them. It also, this helps us understand why reefs are so productive, because this partnership really makes for a very effective community in very non-productive tropical waters, very low nutrients, and so this partnership gets around that. And these coral reefs are very diverse. They're excellent places for fish. The one thing though is that corals, if the temperature gets too warm, corals will expel their algae, and they can do this intentionally, and this is what's called coral bleaching. So I hope these are examples help you when you think about photosynthesis, to think about how widespread it is, how useful it is, what it does for people and for animals and the environment. It's a really, really important set of reactions.